if you are going to ask the nation to stop for 5 or 10 minutes, you've got to have something to say. And the problem with the Prime Minister's speech last night was that it was really empty of any substance. He had nothing significant to say except these are tough times and don't drive your car any more than you need to. So I thought it was pretty empty, and yes, I agree with you. I think the government is preparing us for a budget which will involve yet more taxing and yet more spending.
The Australian way of life is under threat like never before. Sectarian violence is rife on our streets. The political class is silencing mainstream Australians under the guise of hate speech. And the media, universities and major civic organisations continue to fan the flames of division. Australia is without leadership and Australians are losing hope. 2026 will be the year that defines the future of our great nation. Are we up to the task? Hello, Tony, and g'day to all of our viewers and listeners. Great to be back. Today, Tony will be sharing his insights on the Prime Minister's national address and the fuel crisis, the latest developments in Iran, and the state of the Liberal Party as it pertains to the recent election in South Australia and the developments in Victoria. Tony, great to be back with you.
Good to be with you, Dan.
All right, let's start with the Prime Minister's address to the nation. A bit of a strange address, I think. Nothing new in there. A bit of a message of keep calm and carry on. But it appears to be the case, at least to me, that he's softening up the nation for maybe a bad budget or some restrictions on fuel use and so forth over the coming weeks. What's your perspective on the Prime Minister's address?
Well, Dan, if you are going to ask the nation to stop for 5 or 10 minutes, you've got to have something to say. And the problem with the Prime Minister's speech last night was that it was really empty of any substance. He had nothing significant to say except these are tough times and don't drive your car any more than you need to. So I thought it was pretty empty, and yes, I agree with you. I think the government is preparing us for a budget which will involve yet more taxing and yet more spending.
And if you were in the position of Anthony Albanese now, if you were Prime Minister, or if this had happened when you were PM with the potential fuel shortages and issues pertaining to that, how would you have gone about managing this situation, do you think?
Well, as the Irishman said when asked the way to Dublin, I wouldn't start from here. I mean, plainly, there are a lot of things that we need to do. Obviously, we need more than 30 days onshore available fuel. We should have the 90 days reserve, which the International Energy Agency requires us. We have got to get more fossil fuels out of the ground, and that means resuming oil exploration and extraction as fast as we can, and quite possibly it means looking at turning coal into oil, which has been happening for about 50 years in South Africa, and I believe could be economic if done in Australia. The other thing we need to do is urgently upgrade our armed forces so that if there is a need to keep the sea lanes open, we are able to make a meaningful contribution to it. So more fuel storage, more fuel extraction, and more capability to intervene in the world's trouble spots in our national interest. And the problem is that we've got a government which has neglected fuel storage, even though the warnings have been coming thick and fast, certainly over the last 5 years since the pandemic. It basically has this neuralgia about any fossil fuel extraction because it thinks fossil fuels are killing the planet, even though it's obvious that they are essential for almost every aspect of daily life. And third, because this is a government of quasi-pacifists, they have woefully and lamentably neglected our armed forces.
Well, speaking of that, let's talk about the latest developments in Iran. President Trump is his usual self in claiming success, claiming that it will be over in 2 or 3 weeks. Now, whether that happens or not, who knows? There's the prospect of ground troops being sent in. This could drag on for potentially a very long time. What's your assessment of where that conflict currently sits?
Well, obviously, the president's announcements have been many and varied, so to speak. And if you're looking for a consistent message from this administration, you're unlikely to find it. That said, I think what President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu are aiming to do is absolutely right. The Iranian regime is thoroughly evil. It is an absolute menace to the wider world. The fact that it is now lashing out at all countries within range of its missiles and rockets shows just what a diabolical regime it is. And the sooner the world is rid of this apocalyptic theocracy in Tehran, the better for everyone. Plainly, we cannot leave Iran with a kind of stranglehold over 20% of the world's oil and gas, which is the case at the moment. I think that Australia should be offering to help. Yes, even now, despite the enfeebling of our armed forces, there is more we could do. Had it been me, once it was obvious that the Americans were moving to do something, I would have been in touch with the Americans to say, what can Australia do to help? Back in 2014 and 2015, we contributed special forces to help in the recapture of Mosul. We had our training team on the ground to help the Iraqi army to rebuild. We had our strike fighters flying missions across the Middle Eastern war zone. We had our command and control and our refuelling aircraft in theatre. So that's the kind of thing that I think Australia should be prepared to do in a situation like this. The pity is that our Navy has been so run down that there's not much we can do there. But whatever we can do, we should do, because in the end, we are part of a family of nations. If the free world is in trouble anywhere, there's a sense in which it's endangered everywhere. And Australia historically has always been prepared to do its bit for the free world.
It seems like the alliance is coming under more strain as time goes by. Obviously, President Trump is, much more focused on America's own situation than he is necessarily concerned about that of some allies, which at one level is understandable given that allies haven't always done what they could do to assist America, particularly in Europe. But we also have a government here in Australia that has been, fairly relaxed at best about our relationship with the United States. Do you think that this is maybe a longer-term challenge that we're going to face, or could it be the case that once President Trump leaves and once this current Prime Minister is no longer Prime Minister in Australia, that relationship will then strengthen again?
Well, an alliance has got to be a mutual thing, Dan. And if we expect others to help us, in our troubles, we've got to be prepared to help them in theirs. And we went to war twice, in 1914 and in 1939, because we understood that if Britain fell, that would have catastrophic ramifications for Australia. Likewise, if the Pax Americana is destroyed, that would have catastrophic implications for Australia. I mean, a world dominated by America is a world that looks more like America. A world dominated by Russia and China is a world that will look more like those grim dictatorships. So it is absolutely in our interests to help the United States wherever it needs help. And as I said, I can't think of a more just cause than doing everything we reasonably can to rid Iran of any potential to get nuclear weapons and to free the Iranian people of what has been an absolutely brutal and barbaric regime. Let's not forget that it was only a few weeks back that they were mowing down tens of thousands of their own citizens who had the temerity to come out into the streets to protest.
Well, let's talk about things closer to home and the current situation with the Liberal Party, starting with Victoria, and what the national implications of this may be. So we've just had Moira Deeming, who was dumped as the number one candidate for the Legislative Council in the Western Metro area. Now that was then overturned, if you like, and as we speak, they're going through that process again in some way, shape or form. You issued a warning that it would be crackers, I think were the words that you used to...
I think I said it would. The Liberal Party would have to have a death wish.
A death wish.
Not to re-endorse Moira.
And, do they have a death wish?
Well, plainly, there is something very rotten in the state of the Victorian Liberal Party. Moira has been subject to injustice after injustice. She should never have been accused of being a neo-Nazi. She should never have had to protect her reputation in the courts at massive cost. She should never have been tossed out of the Victorian Liberal Party room. She should have been given an abject apology the instant the court ruled so decisively in her favour. She shouldn't have been subject to this kind of pre-selection challenge. It's just been a litany of incompetence and malice on the part of people very close to the top of the Victorian Liberal Party. And the best thing that could happen now, even at this late stage, would be for the Victorian Liberal executive to simply re-endorse Moira and in the process issue the abject apology that they should have issued months and months ago.
It does suggest, as you say, that there is something pretty fundamental here. And my assessment, and we can also talk about the South Australian situation, is that the Liberal Party really has been rivened by factional division in a way that really challenges its purpose of existing. As you know, when Menzies set it up, it was partly to overcome those factional and the sectional interests that had taken over the United Australia Party. And it sort of appears to be the case that it's fallen now back into some of those really divided, fiefdoms that basically inhibit its capacity to be a truly national party.
You make some very fair points, Dan. I'm more familiar with the New South Wales division than the Victorian one, but in New South Wales, and I suspect here in Victoria as well, the party has become a bit of an insiders club. It's become a bit of a closed shop. We don't have enough members. There's too much factional control. There's too much attempted manipulation from the top. And the rules are either very restrictive in terms of trying to exclude members from any real say, or they're manipulated by the factional warlords or people at the top to try to deprive ordinary members of a say. So what do we need to do? I think we really need to open up the party. We should be saying to the general public, look, if you normally vote Liberal, if you have an interest in policy, if you're concerned about the state of our public life, please join the party and make a difference. Because while the party will never be perfect, it will be better for your presence. So we need far more members. Then we need to change the rules to ensure that the members do get a say, particularly over pre-selections where the members absolutely should be sovereign. And we should be perfectly happy to see the wider membership debating policy. Now, as a former Member of Parliament, I understand that in the end it is the parliamentary party that decides policy, but that doesn't mean that the membership shouldn't be encouraged to debate policy, have their say and offer their thoughts to the parliamentarians. And then we need to make sure that the party rules are actually followed. Now, again, I don't claim to know every last detail of what's happening in Victoria, but what kind of a political party sets itself up as a bank to bail out someone who has foolishly embarked on a ruinous court case, run up massive debts, apparently backed by others who've never been named, and who then, having supported this guy, fail to honour their obligations to him. I mean, this is crazy. It really is. And the sooner this mess is sorted out, the better. I see that there's now calls for the resignation of the president and the vice presidents. People who have been as responsible as they are for a disaster of such cascading magnitude really have got to accept responsibility and fall on their swords.
Hi, thanks for watching. Did you know that 3/4 of you watching this podcast aren't currently subscribed to the IPA's YouTube channel? So do us a favour, hit subscribe and you won't miss any of the action. While you're at it, head to ipa.org.au, follow the prompts to subscribe to the IPA's website, so that way you will find all of our research and analysis. Now back to the chat. Well, let's talk about the South Australian election and the fallout from that, and again, the national implications of it. I don't think that the results can be understated and how big of a deal they are. South Australia sometimes goes a bit understudied because it's not a major player on the national stage, but it does show what can happen when things go very badly for the Liberal Party. And there has been a complete wipeout of the Liberal Party in the outer suburbs, where they polled fourth in most outer suburban seats, behind Labor, behind One Nation, behind the Greens. The primary vote was 6 or 7% in a lot of these seats. One Nation in something like over a dozen seats is now the two-party preferred, not the Liberal Party. And it's also beat the Liberal Party in the urban fringe, in the middle suburbs. It's not just the outer suburbs, it's the middle suburbs that One Nation has overtaken the Liberal Party as well. This is quite an astonishing result. One Nation plus the independents now have more seats in the lower house than the Liberal Party, so they could theoretically form opposition, though I haven't heard anything of that nature. This should be a real wake-up call for all of the state divisions and the federal party as well. But I'm not seeing a lot of change, I've got to say.
Well, you're right, Dan. It is an extraordinary wake-up call. I mean, it's a fire alarm that's gone off in the building. And it's vital that we heed the lesson. And the lesson is that a lot of traditional Liberal voters feel badly let down, and they think that our party, probably for a decade now, has been lacking in A, conviction, and B, competence. And that's what we need to demonstrate, conviction and competence. Now, I'm a big fan of Angus Taylor. I'm a big fan of Matt Canavan. I think that the new leadership team in Canberra is going to make a big difference. But you don't turn things around overnight. I think Taylor and Canavan need to be given a fair go. But there is no doubt this is the worst crisis that the centre-right of Australian politics has faced since 1943. And if we don't change and change fast, we're in all sorts of trouble. I mean, I should say, Dan, that while I absolutely understand why people have voted for One Nation, and while I have a degree of respect for Pauline Hanson and for Barnaby Joyce, Pauline has certainly showed extraordinary resilience and a degree of consistency over decades now. Barnaby's a decent bloke, even though I wish he hadn't ratted on the party that had made him Deputy Prime Minister. So I understand people's frustrations. I would say, though, as we saw in South Australia, a big One Nation vote is more likely to produce a Labor government than a more conservative government, because if you split the centre-right vote, in the end, that is more likely to benefit the Labor Party than it is to produce a stronger and more cohesive centre-right political force. For all its faults, the Liberal Party, in coalition with the National Party, remains the best hope of better government in this country, although I absolutely accept that what we need is a better Liberal Party in the future than we've had in the recent past.
What was also interesting in South Australia is that One Nation took a lot of votes from Labor as well. Labor's primary vote across the state went down by 2.5%, even though they've got Malinaskis there, who apparently is insurmountable, and clearly he is not. He's very vulnerable in a way that most people don't understand, because he's got to keep all of the wokesters on the left on side. So he does the voice to Parliament, he does a treaty, and he gets away with it because no one's attacking him other than One Nation. They're the only one taking the fight to him. I'll just give you one example. You look at a seat like Elizabeth in the outer northern suburbs, which is a classic Labor working class seat. That went from a 70-30 Labor Liberal two-party preferred to 55-45 Labor One Nation. So Labor's working class base has left them as well. So I think Labor is much more vulnerable than what they understand themselves.
Well, I hear you, Dan, but while the Labor vote declined by 2 or 3 percentage points, I think the Liberal vote declined by something like 15 percentage points. So let's be under no illusions. One Nation is taking far more votes from the Liberal Party than it's taking from the Labor Party. And please, before we get too gleeful about One Nation's success, let's remember that the result has been an unprecedented landslide for Labor. So if you look at the impact of One Nation on Australian politics so far, it's been to help Labor governments rather than Liberal governments.
But isn't it the point that it's the Liberal Party that have done this? It's. I think there is a tendency of some to want to point the finger at One Nation and to say they're the ones delivering a Labor government. But my view is it's the Liberal Party delivering a Labor government because of the Liberal Party's inability to be the party, to be a strong. If the Liberal Party was a strong centre-right party, in all likelihood, yes, One Nation would be performing well, but it would be getting 10%, not 25%.
So what we need to be doing, rather than pumping the tyres of One Nation, is working as hard as we can to produce a better Liberal Party. And you're right, Dan. One Nation had its first explosion onto the political scene in the late 90s, when people were unhappy first with the Keating government and then thought that John Howard wasn't doing enough to change things. But as the Howard government hit its straps, One Nation virtually disappeared. It has come back over the last decade or so as, I suppose, the Liberal Party lost its way. But when the Liberal Party was strongly led from the centre-right, first by John Howard and then, if I may say so, by myself, One Nation virtually disappeared because there was no need for it. So what we need to do is work as hard as we can to produce the best possible Liberal Party if we want strong centre-right government in this country.
Just one last thing on the One Nation component. My view is there's a big difference between now and then. Now a lot more people feel the system's rigged against them, and they don't trust politicians of any nature. Whereas in the late 90s, I think Australia was a much more stable, cohesive country. Housing was in reach. Yes, we had some cultural self-loathing, but by and large, we were a united nation. We did not have the Bondi terror attack, as an example. I think that the year 2026 is very different than the year 1996, and I would not underestimate the level of anger and discontent in a large and growing minority of the population, where they basically say politicians have failed us and we want a radical change. We don't just want incrementalism.
Well, I don't dispute that we are a more discontented society, a more divided society now than we were 20 years ago. I don't dispute that for a second. But again, we need a constructive way forward, not a destructive way forward. Let's not jump out of the frying pan into the fire. And in the end, we want a sensible party that is capable of governing. And much as I respect Pauline Hanson, I think she sees herself as attempting to keep the other parties honest, a bit like Don Chipp all those years ago. And fair enough, do your best to keep the major parties honest. But again, I say, Dan, if we want a better government in this country, for all its faults, our best hope is a better Liberal Party. So that's what we should be working for.
And just, I think, one last question around this conversation out. In terms of the Victorian election at the end of this year, and then we've got the New South Wales election at the start of next year, in March of next year, where do you think that those two state elections are going, and how do you think the results from those state elections will then potentially shape the federal election, including whether or not Albanese will want to go to perhaps an early election sometime mid next year?
Well, let's just look at the Victorian election because that's the first one that's coming up. The Allan Labor government is a disgrace. this is the worst government in our country by miles. Even Albanese is a comparative statesman compared to the people running Victoria. So Victoria desperately needs a change of government. I think under Jess Wilson, the Liberal Party is performing much better than it was. I certainly think that the Liberal Party organisation in Victoria needs to be shaken up big time. And what we need to see is a united Liberal Party with strong and clear alternative policies so that Victorians have a decent alternative to vote for. The other thing that we need is obviously strong preference exchange between all of the parties of the right so that we maximise the likelihood of getting rid of a terrible government.
All right, Tony, thanks for your time. We'll leave it there and we'll chat again in a couple of weeks.
I look forward to that, Dan.
This is a production of the Centre for the Australian Way of Life at the Institute of Public Affairs. To find out more, visit australia.ipa.org.au.